What is happening, everyone? Hope you guys are doing awesome. I've got a little update for you on the TTR 125. So this is how she sits right now. Got the wheels and plastics off of it. And everything's over here sitting on the cart, ready to go. Still waiting on some parts. Should be here tomorrow or the next day. But in the meantime, I've got some bearings I could go and grease up. I'm gonna start with these wheel bearings. I've been using this method for greasing bearings that doesn't require pulling them out of the hubs. So I'll start by pulling this dust seal off and then take the seal off the face of the bearing as well. And so I'll put the wheel on an axle. That's for the wheel truing stand over here. That axle up there. Put it, slide it through the bearings, and as the wheel's spinning around, I'll push grease into the bearing using a syringe. So I picked this syringe up off Amazon, and I wanted a big one, but this one is a little bigger than I expected. The thing is huge, but what's nice about it is it's got a fine tip on it. So you can see right here, and that works really good for getting the grease in exactly where you want it. So I'll show you how I go about greasing these bearings. To start things off, I'm gonna need to pop these seals out of here. Pretty dirty inside of here. Hopefully these bearings are fine. Alright, now there's a little seal on the outside of this bearing that I need to pull off. And you gotta be really delicate with these. Just slowly work it up. So that's it for the rear wheel. On to the front wheel. As you can tell, these bearings are in need of a cleaning and re-greasing. They were not kept up on very good. So to clean them out, I'm gonna use brake cleaner and just try to brush as much of this dirt and old grease out of here as possible. So I'm gonna take these wheels over to the sink and wash out all this grease and dirt. To rid these bearings of all the water, the air compressor works really well for this. These bearings actually came out a lot cleaner than what I was expecting. I think the air compressor helped blow a lot of that junk out too. So now it's on to cleaning up these seals, and then I'm gonna repack these bearings. Before I do any greasing, I'm gonna have to fill up my syringe with grease. Before I squirt any grease into this bearing, I gotta find a socket that's the same outside diameter as this bearing. This one seems to fit pretty good. So I use the socket to force the grease down into the bearing, and so that way it pushes it to the other side. I've got this axle off of a truing stand that I'm gonna slide through the bearings, and this is what I'm gonna spin the wheel on. And to keep this in place on the cart here, I'll put the end down on a rag, that way it doesn't slide around. So I've got this bearing pretty well filled in. Now I'm gonna slide the socket down onto here and push the grease into the bearing. All right, as I'm spinning the wheel, I'm gonna push down on the socket, and this will force the grease down into the bearing. So you remember all that grease I squirted into the bearing? It's now forced its way into the bearing. So the syringe idea works pretty good, but I just bought too big of a syringe. There's so much grease I'm trying to push through here. This is really hard. I gotta use two hands to force the grease out of it. but I'm gonna go and buy a smaller one and see if it works a little better. Now that's what I would call a pack bearing. There is no more grease I could fit in that one. The final step, of course, is to pop these seals back on, and the wheel is ready to go. Alright, now I've just got 3 more bearings to do. Well guys, that's it for the wheel bearings. Pretty simple process actually. Next up is gonna be the shock linkage. Gonna pull that off and re-grease those bushings. Alright everyone, you know what time it is. It is time to pick a winner for this giveaway on the sprocket I did a few days ago. So I'm gonna go through these comments and just pick a random correct guess. First of all, 517 comments. You guys are amazing. Blowing my mind over here. So how I'm gonna pick this random comment, I am going to scroll up and down the page. So I've got all the comments loaded here. This is at the very bottom, all the way up to the top. I'm gonna scroll up and down the page with the wheel here on the mouse. And whoever's comment is at the top of the page when I stop scrolling, you are the winner. But of course, your guess has to be correct too. All right, let's go for it. Just gonna randomly spin this wheel. It's like spinning the wheel on a game. Man, there are so many comments here. Crazy. All right, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. All right, top comment. So this guy was actually the top one. Where do you live? It's already snowing, but that's not it. So the next one down is riding and fishing. And anyone that said carburetor, floats, or something along the lines of needle, floats, carburetor, that is correct. When I bought that bike, the initial problem was the carburetor was all jacked up, the floats and float needle, whatnot. So any of those guesses would have done. Riding and fishing, you are the winner. I'm gonna need your shipping address. So reply to this comment with your email address, and I'll send you an email and get your shipping address so I can send the sprocket over to you. Thanks, man. Let's go get the sprocket signed and ready to be sent off to the winner. Well, to rip this linkage off, I've got 3 bolts. The lower shock bolt, the one connecting to the swing arm right here, and the one farther up front on the frame. With this linkage being a little bit tight in here, it's going to be easier to pull the shock off first. Before I tear into this linkage at all, I'm gonna go clean it up. I would have to say the linkage turned out pretty freaking good. With this linkage, it's pretty simple. There's actually no bearings. It's just this bushing inside of a nylon sleeve. So I've got one more piece to take off here. With these types of bushings, it's pretty easy. Basically just pop these caps off, slide out the pin, wipe everything down and re-grease it. Not much else to it. Alright, that's it for greasing the linkage. Wasn't too bad. I would much rather grease these types of bushings over needle bearings any day of the week. It's so much easier. Now I'm going to put these two pieces back together and slap the linkage back on the bike. I've got this linkage mounted up again and it feels buttery smooth, super nice. Now it's on to putting the shock back on and this rear suspension will be all dialed in. The last thing on the list for today is to install some new grips. I happen to have these blue ones laying around, so those will go perfect on the TTR. And of course, it's always a good idea to clean up the bar ends with some brake cleaner before sliding these grips on. So here's the technique I've used for a while for installing grips. Instead of using grip glue or wire to hold it on, I'll use compressed air, and I just gotta make sure the inside of the grip is dry and the ferrule tube is somewhat clean. So basically, the compressed air just expands the grip, you slide it on, and it'll stay on for a while. That thing ain't going nowhere. Wow, that's solid. So again, this is how I do it. I'll slide the grip on a little bit, pull up on the grip, and put the nozzle inside the grip here. And it's pretty much just throw some air in it and push it on. So the grips are on, and these things are not going anywhere. Yeah, they're on pretty good. So you can use that same method for removing grips as well. Just blow some compressed air into the inside of the grip and the grips will come flying off. And actually, once you have one grip off, you can blow air into the end of the handlebar and the other grip will come flying off like a blow dart. Well, 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 look what just showed up. Got my parts a day early. So in the next video on this TTR, I'll have some new parts to install. That is going to be the end of today's video. Hope you guys enjoyed it, and I will see you all tomorrow. Take care.